Okay, today we're going to be making Avgolemono soup, and that's a Greek style chicken, lemon, and egg soup. And the first thing I do is start out with a raw chicken that I will roast. I'll roast it for an hour and 15 minutes at 425. And I've put 2 big pinches of salt on it, and I like to roast them breast side down so that the breasts are more moist. And then after that, I'll take off the meat, I'll debone it and separate out the meat and the skin. And I'll boil the skin and the bones and the cartilage and everything else so we can get as much of those nutrients and make a delicious broth. And then we'll make a gravy, which I'm actually going to skip ahead in this particular video when we get to that point, because I already have 2 videos on how to make chicken gravy. But I will be making that gravy, I just won't video it. And then we'll turn that into a broth using the remaining broth from our boiled chicken parts. And then after that, we're going to take lemon juice, we're going to take eggs, we're going to mix them together, and then we're going to temper it with our broth gravy mix, add in some salt, pepper, and dill, and that is how we make our tasty, tasty soup. So I'm going to get this started, get it into the oven, and while that's in the oven, I'm going to get my lemons juiced and my eggs cracked and get everything ready so that when it comes out, I can get on that broth and make the soup. All right, so while the chicken is cooking, I'm going to go ahead and get my lemons prepped and my eggs prepped. And so I like to start out with 7 lemons. My ratio that I found that makes the creamiest, most delicious soup is 8 eggs to 7 large lemons. And I have this lemon juicer, which was found at a thrift store, but I've used some of the presses and the other kinds. This one, it's plastic, but it has a really sharp ridges, and so I found that to be the best. And so I'm going to go through and juice all 7 of these lemons. I start out by rolling them and make sure to get all of those liquids loose inside. Cut it out, and so where I can, I try to get the seeds out. You can't get all of them probably, but this way it doesn't gum up, doesn't block the juicer. So where I can, I get those out here. All right. I'll go through and juice them. And I'll get my seeds out of here and keep doing it. I got to get the seeds out because otherwise it'll gum up the juicer. But I'll do that for all 7 lemons, and then I'm going to put them in a big giant bowl, and then we'll get the eggs cracked and put in there too. All right, so I have my 7 lemons that have been juiced in this big bowl, and I got out 8 eggs, and I'm going to crack them in here and stir them up. And we have about 35 minutes left on our chicken, and that's fine. You know, it's okay to get your eggs out and get them up to room temperature. That way when you temper them in the soup, you don't have as they'll be closer to boiling than if you mix this right at last minute and brought your eggs right out of the refrigerator around, 33, 34 degrees. So you want to make sure you're using room temperature eggs, at least by the time you're tempering it, which might be about 2 hours. About 2 hours after you start this process. All right, and here are my 8 eggs and 7 lemons. I'm going to go ahead and get these stirred up so that it's homogeneous. The nice thing is that even though there's quite a bit of lemons in the soup, it doesn't turn out to be too sour because the eggs really cut the acidity of the lemons, and likewise the lemons cut the kind of egginess of the eggs. So this is a really great way to just pack your soup with a ton of protein and a ton of vitamin C, and it's really great for people who are under the weather or sick, or even if they're not sick, just maybe they're recovering from like surgery or something like that. This is just such a good soup to get protein into people and antioxidants. Okay, so now that our eggs and our lemon have been mixed together, we're going to, I'm still cooking my chicken, so I can't do anything with that now, but I'm going to take my dill and get it all chopped up just so that when it's time to assemble the soup, we have everything ready to go. Okay, so this is the dill I'll be using today. Keep your eyes out when you're at Costco or Sam's Club, sometimes even Whole Foods. You can get like a whole bunch of it, like almost a bushel, or like the amount that you would get if you're getting parsley or cilantro. And this has to be washed. So I'm going to get this out and get these pieces washed, and then we'll come back and chop them up. All right, so I've washed these, and I'm going to take apart the pieces of dill so that I can chop them real fine. This was a small package, so if you end up getting one of those large bundles at one of the bigger stores, you may not need all of the dill that you get in a bundle like that. So one thing you can do is just wash it and lay it on a paper towel and leave it out, and it'll dry pretty quickly. Whatever leftovers you have will dry pretty quickly into a dry dill that'll be easy to add to any of the meals you're making. We've done that before, and I even used dried dill that we've saved from a previous batch of dill in this soup, and it tastes just as delicious. So, and if you don't want to do this, you would just want to use dry dill that you get, from the grocery store, you can do that. I've done it before. I just think it adds an extra layer of flavor and freshness to use fresh ingredients when possible, but you can still get a pretty decent soup even if you're using dried dill from the grocery store. So I'm going to get all of these little pieces disconnected here, and then I'll chop them up once we have our entire bushel of dill here separated from the stalks. All right, so I've got my dill all separated out from the stalks, and I'm going to go ahead and chop it up into smaller pieces. All right, and we have about 12 minutes before the chicken is done in the oven, and then once I get that out, I'll let it cool for a little bit, debone it, and then we'll get started on boiling our bones and our skin and our cartilage and all the other pieces that aren't meat. So I just pulled the chicken out, and it's been baking for an hour and 15 minutes at 425 degrees. I put a towel on the handle there so that I don't forget how hot that handle is. And I recommend that if you are using a cast iron skillet or any sort of skillet and doing the same thing, that you also put something on there so that you don't grab it in a moment of mindlessness, which I have done before. So I'm going to let this cool just for a little bit, and then I'll get to taking off the skin and the bones and separating that out from the chicken meat. All right, so I've separated out my chicken from the bones and the cartilage and the skin. And I've put it in this pressure cooker. This is a mechanical pressure cooker, but you might have an Instapot or one of those kinds of brands, and that would be just fine to make this in that. I like mechanical pressure cookers because, you know, they're based entirely on the pressure and temperature of the water. It's not like it's going to get stuck in a function because the electronics, you know, malfunction or it won't open or something like that. So I just like these because it's just based on physics. So I'm going to go ahead and add some water. The more water you add, the longer it'll take to come up to temperature and boil. So I'm just going to use a little bit of water, and I'm going to put in some salt, not too much, but we can adjust it. So this might come out like a stock concentrate. And then we can add water afterwards when we're making our soup, or we're making the broth for our soup to get the volume that we need to fill a pot. And while I'm getting this up to boil, I'm going to be working on boiling off the drippings of this pot. I'll use another burner. And I'll just do it on real low because it's going to take about 25 minutes. Well, it might take longer to bring it up to temperature, but I want to boil these skin and bones and cartilage for 25 minutes in the pressure cooker to get all the nutrients out of it. All right, so I've deboned all my chicken here, and I've cubed it, and so this will go into the soup. And here's the pressure cooker, the mechanical pressure cooker. It's been sitting so I can open it, and here's inside. So I'm going to go ahead and strain out those chicken parts, and then I'm going to use this to make the gravy, and I'll show you the gravy when it's finished, and then I'm going to turn that into like a bigger pot of soup broth. Like I said before, I'm not going to show me making the gravy since episode 1 and 2 is essentially the same thing. Episode 1 and 2 of this channel is making chicken gravy from a cast iron skillet. So I'll get back in touch with you once the gravy's made and we're about to mix in with more chicken stock. All right, so here's the gravy that I made with the drippings and a little bit of flour and the broth that we'd made in the pressure cooker. And here's the remainder of the broth that hasn't been added to the gravy yet. I'm going to go ahead and add the gravy to this broth and then add a bit more water so that we can get ourselves, I gotta clean that off, so we can get ourselves a nice amount of stock. It's going to take quite a bit of stock to temper all of those eggs. So I'm going to add some water, add some salt, get it to the kind of savor, like tasty salt savor flavor that I want for the soup. And once I have the broth there, then we can go ahead and temper those eggs and that lemon, and we'll complete our soup. Okay, so I have my my eggs and my lemon mixture, and I have this pot of broth that's going at a really high boil. I want this to be boiling like in a rolling boil, because then I know that the hottest liquid is going in to temper my eggs. And so hopefully you'll be able to see how this is going to go. This is kind of the most complicated part of making this this meal. So if you get this down, you got the meal. So I'm just going to start out with 1 ladle of boiling stock. Do it here on the side and stir constantly. This is going to cook the eggs, but slowly. You want to do it slowly, otherwise your eggs will curdle and you'll basically get like lemon scrambled eggs, which is still edible. I mean, it wouldn't be bad, but it wouldn't be like a homogeneous, creamy texture. I've done that before, and still ate the pot of soup. If you just do it slow and consistently like this, you'll get your eggs tempered, and it won't curdle. And the hotter you can get your eggs, the better it'll be for reheating the soup. So if you can get the eggs almost as hot as a rolling boil, then that means you can heat up your soup on the stovetop and simmer it, and it won't curdle. So that's, you know, I've read other recipes for this soup, and they'll say, oh, you just put in 2 cups of hot liquid. And I'm like, I don't know about that, because, you know, if you try to heat it up, it'll curdle. So that's why you want to basically get a really big stock pot full of liquid and then temper your eggs 1 ladleful at a time of rolling, boiling hot water, so that when you reheat it, even if it's just to a light simmer in the future, it's not going to curdle. Of course, in those recipes, they're using like 1 or 2 eggs and not 8. So they have fewer eggs to temper. So as you have more liquid added to your pot of eggs, you can decrease the amount of time that it takes to add your stock, because chances are it's not going to curdle at this point. Before, I was pouring it in pretty slow and on the side there, because it was, you know, super hot liquid going into room temperature eggs, and so I wanted to make sure that I was tempering it appropriately. But as you add more and more liquid, you can decrease the amount of time between ladles, and also just kind of go ahead and pour it in without much consideration of distance and time and quickness. All right, I just have, about like ½ an inch of stock left on the bottom there. So I'm gonna go ahead and pour this back in to this pot, turn it on low. And now I'm also going to add in the chicken chunks. and the dill. And I'd put, when I was pulling the stock up to a rolling boil, I had tasted it to make sure it had the right amount of salt in it, and I added a couple of turns of fresh cracked pepper and about 3 drops of Tabasco sauce, which is an old Cajun trick where you just add a couple of drops to like your soups and gravies, and it's not enough to actually make it spicy, but it's enough to like open up the flavor and cause kind of a very, very gentle, mild reaction in the mouth. So I'm going to taste this and see if I need to add more salt. No, that's perfect. So I have a bowl here of brown rice. I like this soup with brown rice. I think most recipes call for white rice, but we're a brown rice family. And ladle that up, chicken and the rich creamy broth, fresh dill. And you can see this soup, it's just so tasty and fresh, and it's perfect if you're under the weather. Great to make for your family and your friends whom you love, and also for your enemies. So yes, I hope that you will make this soup. I hope you will try it out and let me know how it goes for you. I don't know how to work comments because I'm kind of a YouTube noob. So if you do make this soup, just tell me in real life, because that's probably the only people that are actually watching this channel. I'd love to know if you had any troubles or if there was something that you thought you could do to make it easier. I'd love to hear what you have to say about it.